You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got some breaking news, some rare good news out of the U.S. Supreme Court as far as Donald Trump's sentencing is concerned. Can you explain what just happened here?
You know, Brian, if we can't get some justice, what we are about to get is perhaps the next best thing, because the U.S. Supreme Court just rejected Donald Trump's efforts to put a stop to his sentencing hearing scheduled for Friday on his 34 felony guilty verdicts in New York. And let's remember, the crimes he was convicted of, found guilty of by a jury of his peers, 34 felony crimes of falsifying business records designed to hide from the voters of New York deeply damaging information about his unsuitability to be president. This was back during the 2016 election. So the Supreme Court just handed down its anxiously awaited opinion, and let me read it because it's only 3 sentences. Here is what they just said. They said the application for stay presented to Justice Sotomayor, because she is the justice responsible for that federal judicial region, presented to Justice Sotomayor and by her referred to the court. So the full court decided this issue is denied for, among other reasons, first, the alleged evidentiary violations at President-elect Trump's state court trial can be addressed in the ordinary course on appeal. Second, the burden that sentencing will impose on the president-elect's responsibilities is relatively insubstantial in light of the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. And here is the part that should perhaps surprise exactly nobody. There were 4 dissenting justices. 4 justices wanted to, let me use a legal term, shit all over those juries' 34 guilty verdicts, dishonor the service of those jurors in New York, and by extension, all of the people of New York, and put a stop to Donald Trump's sentencing. Who were those 4 justices? Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh. They said they would grant the application and put a stop to Donald Trump's sentencing. Interestingly, and perhaps also surprisingly, Judge Amy Coney Barrett sided with the 3 more liberal justices, and Chief Justice Roberts crossed over and joined the 5-justice majority. So that is where this issue stands as of this moment, and we are going to see Donald Trump not only sentenced on his felony convictions, but we will now have the next president of the United States be a convicted felon.
And for posterity here, there is nothing, now that the Supreme Court has weighed in here, that Donald Trump could do to put off or prevent this conviction and the lack of any actual sentencing, any accountability for it. But at least this conviction will stand firm, and he will officially be a convicted felon after this.
Nothing that would be lawful that Donald Trump or his lawyers can do to stop this sentencing train from rolling on Friday.
We're basically at the point where, short of them pulling the fire alarm in the courthouse on Friday, this thing is going to stick.
Yeah, and who would put that past Donald Trump and his underlings to pull a fire alarm or do something that was the equivalent of that? But, let me just talk a little bit about what we can expect at Donald Trump's sentencing hearing, because, we don't really know precisely what the prosecutors will argue. When we go into sentencing hearings, and I did more than I can count in my 30 years as a prosecutor, what the prosecutor does is present the people's case in aggravation. What does that mean? It means we highlight not only the jury's verdict, not only all of the felonies that Donald Trump committed, but how he committed them, why he committed them, and who, in a very real sense, are the victims of his crimes. And the victims of his crimes are not just the voters of New York, but all of the people of New York, because he violated New York state law 34 times over to try to hide, to bury, to secrete information about his unsuitability to be president from the voters when they went to the polls. I would argue by extension, all of the voters and all of the people of the United States are victims of Donald Trump's falsifying business records crimes. So what I expect Alvin Bragg's prosecutors to do is present the prosecution's, the people's case in aggravation. Now, we all believe it's a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump will get no jail time. Why? Because Judge Merchan, the presiding judge, already announced in an earlier order he issued that he was inclined to impose a sentence of an unconditional discharge. Now, I will also say, Brian, in my 30 years, I've never heard of a judge imposing an unconditional discharge. Why? Well, when you're convicted by a jury of a few dozen felony crimes, you've richly earned some punishment. But an unconditional discharge means no jail time, no fine, no probations, no conditions set by the court that Donald Trump would have to comply with to be successful on probation or court supervision. It is basically just bringing the case to an absolute end the moment sentence is imposed, with no other conditions that Donald Trump will have to labor under. Let me just tell our viewers that the sort of lowest level of punishment that most prosecutors, and I think I can speak for most prosecutors, ever see in criminal cases handed out by judges is what's called unsupervised probation. But what that means is the judge will say, look, you've been convicted of crimes in violation of the laws of our jurisdiction by a jury of your peers, but I don't believe your crimes are worthy of much punishment. So I will put you on unsupervised probation. And all that means is you have to keep your nose clean. Don't get rearrested. Don't commit any new crimes. And after a period of time that I am setting, 6 months, a year, 2 years, after that period of time expires, you will no longer be on probation of any kind. That's about as close to an unconditional discharge as, we ordinarily see in the practice of criminal law. But I would not expect that Alvin Bragg's prosecutors will stand up in court on Friday and say, well, Judge, because you've said you're not going to punish him, you're going to give him an unconditional discharge, we're not even going to talk about the damage done by Donald Trump courtesy of his 34 felony crimes. They're probably going to present what I hope to be a scorched earth case in aggravation. Then Donald Trump's lawyers will get to stand up and present his case in mitigation, why he is, worthy of no punishment at all. Again, kind of a foregone conclusion given what Donald Trump, his lawyers have already been told by Judge Merchan. And it does look like, Brian, that is part of what weighed into the decision of those 5 Supreme Court justices, where they said, look, there really are no burdens being placed on Donald Trump by virtue of the fact that he has to briefly appear in court on Friday, either live or virtually. We're not sure which way he's going to appear yet, and that'll pretty much be an end of it. So it's not the most invasive thing for us to decline to stop his sentencing.
Now, Glenn, will there be any insight into the courtroom? Are there going to be cameras? Is there audio? This isn't a federal case after all.
No, but New York doesn't permit cameras or live stream audio in the courtroom ordinarily, unless there is some exception made tomorrow. I think that unlikely. So what we will count on is the sort of real-time reporting that comes out of the courtroom courtesy of the many, many journalists who will be in attendance.
Okay, well, I know that you and I are planning to cover this tomorrow, so for everybody watching right now, if you want to follow along so that we have an update on the official conviction of Donald Trump in this New York trial, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.